Hey there, thanks for joining me on this episode of Tropical Weather Impact. It is Thursday, September the 25th. Here in New Orleans, we've been getting some rain this morning as we wait for a cool front to move in. We're really excited about that here on the Gulf Coast. But for our friends over on the East Coast, you've got a whole nother ball game. And what you're going to be watching here is what's happening out in the tropics. So let's start with an overview as things continue to heat up out in the tropics. We can see three separate areas. We still have Hurricane Gabrielle. We have newly formed Tropical Storm Humberto. It formed yesterday, and Invest 94, which is probably going to become a depression, and our next named storm, which is Imelda. And those, especially this one right here, is what the East Coast will be keeping a very close eye on. I'm going to talk about some new data coming in and maybe why there's more of a concern now for the East Coast. Gabrielle, really quickly wanted to start with this and get it out of the way. It's going to be transitioning into a non-tropical system soon, but the remnants of this are near Portugal by Sunday, and even down the cone is in parts of Africa this morning, and so that includes Morocco. If you've got travel plans anywhere that direction, it's not a hurricane once it moves there, but something to monitor. Now let's talk about what's happening closer to the United States here with our two tropical systems, Tropical Storm Humberto and Invest 94. Now, Humberto is expected to become a hurricane in the coming days. We have it as a Category 3 or a major storm by late Sunday or into Monday. Now, at the end of the day, we don't think Humberto is ever going to be a direct problem for the United States. Maybe some large swells, but this looks like it's going to curve out to sea at the end of the day. The problem could come from this little one right here. Now, it's still in its formative stages, so we don't have anything that's extremely organized with Invest 94. The showers and thunderstorms with it have remained somewhat unorganized, but we do have at least a consolidated area of showers and storms, and you can see where that maybe center is trying to come together, has passed over the Dominican Republic, and is going to be moving out into the warm water soon. So this does have a high chance or a likely chance of becoming a depression, named storm, maybe a hurricane on the table. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty with Invest 94 because its future depends on its speed, how much it organizes, and its interaction with the tropical storm or hurricane trailing right behind it. At the end of the day, these are generally going to be traveling in a similar path, at least parallel to each other. Now, Invest 94, if it's moving fast enough, it'll make a real run at the East Coast here by early next week, maybe as soon as Monday or Tuesday. We could have a landfalling named storm somewhere, let's say from Georgia to the Carolinas. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty with this. Again, we don't have a well-defined storm yet. Models are still determining how this will evolve, but there are some signs that maybe there is a threat, a real threat, towards the East Coast. Now, I don't see this making landfall in Florida, but the Bahamas up to the East Coast, really in that watch mode at this point. Let's talk about some of our tropical models and what we notice here. Now, first thing you notice, in the near term, Humberto is moving more northwest and west. Invest 94 has got a little bit more of a northerly component to it. So here we are by the weekend. Models are agreeing that whatever's down here is trying to form. It's right near the Bahamas and the really warm water by this weekend. And I think that's when we could actually have this form into a named storm, would be by Saturday into Sunday. Now, if the path of this, or the speed of this thing stays constant, that's why it has a real chance at running into parts of the East Coast, because it's outrunning Humberto. And you can see here, as we get out in time, you can see some of our high-resolution hurricane models here we use do show this as a named storm near Georgia, or excuse me, South Carolina or North Carolina by Monday. And keep in mind, this is tracking the center of the system. At the same time, look what's happening behind it. Humberto may be coming in a little bit slower and curving. And so if these storms don't get close enough, then they don't have as much interaction. And if they don't have as much interaction, then this storm right here does have that real chance of trying to move inland. And that's been the shift we've seen in our models over the past 12 to 24 hours, is less interaction and maybe more of a chance of it actually moving inland into the Carolinas by early next week. And so we're talking about only 5 days maximum to really watch this, maybe even less here before there could be a landfalling storm right along the East Coast. Now, the intensity of this system, oh, it's tricky, and that's always tricky, but you've got models spitting out left and right different things, and so I think the biggest thing, well, how fast does it organize? Does it struggle to organize? Does Humberto create an atmosphere that's a little hostile for this? These are all weird little factors that are hard to say for sure, but There's a lot of moving parts to this forecast, and again, do expect changes, maybe frequent changes if you live in coastal areas off the East Coast. Here we are Tuesday, here we are Wednesday of next week. You can see a hard turnout to sea. We're seeing less and less indication if there is a storm out here that it's curving out behind Humberto. So yesterday when we were looking at models, you would see this wide spread in the spaghetti plots. You had a couple moving inland, and then you had a few that would slow down, stall right here, and they get tugged back towards Humberto because they were closer, and this storm was moving in a bit slower. With it moving in maybe faster, it's able to outrun the influence of the tropical storm, or the hurricane in that case, that is trailing right behind it. What are our big two global models showing? We're talking about the GFS and the European models. These are not ensembles. These are not the spaghetti plots that you often see. You could see right now they've got Humberto and the red and the green. That's the GFS and European model. You could see they have this tropical wave index 94, still somewhat unorganized, but that's a well-defined tropical wave with showers and storms becoming more organized. So let's go out in motion. Let's put it into Sunday. They do agree we've got a depression or a storm trying to come together right near the Bahamas. And again, it's all about the speed and the timing. If Humberto is a little slower, then it can impact Invest 94, or what would probably be future Imelda, soon enough. And so you see right here, by the time we get into Monday and Tuesday, it's outrunning it. And you've got, well, both models showing something right off the East Coast. They disagree on how organized or strong it could be, but that is a clear indication that there's a real risk for maybe a landfalling storm, let's say from Georgia, South Carolina's here, North Carolina. That would be, if I had to draw a little zone that's really watching this closely, it's right in there. Meanwhile, watch this storm behind it. What's it doing? Well, it's going out to sea as a trough and a cold front start to come down. Now, at the same time, if Imelda or future Imelda moves inland, the other problem with this could be that it's going to be slowing down as that cool front moves in. You get that high pressure, you get all these different steering currents that slow down, and so the storm weakens, yes, but the remnants, the moisture, there's an upper level low spinning over here, that could be a rain problem too. And so the fine details like totals and wind impacts, all these things, we don't know any of that just yet, but we're trying to nail down the steering of all of this because that's going to tell us exactly if there is a real impact to the United States in the coming week or so. And then once you get into the middle of next week, we're talking October the 1st, you get this drawn out mess of what's left over of Humberto, Imelda here probably, and this old cold front. And so you get all this disturbed weather along all those old boundaries. And so there is still a lot of amount of uncertainty with this. Again, if I'm on the East Coast from especially Georgia to North Carolina, I'm watching the forecast frequently and getting those updates for the region as this storm tries to come together. Now, we are still a little too far out to look at some of our high resolution models, but one thing of interest, and that's interesting here, is we can go out through at least Saturday afternoon with some of our high-res models. It cuts off here, so that's why you can't see the tropical storm out in the Atlantic, but you can see that right there is Invest 94 trying to come together. This high-resolution model is doing similar to what the ensemble models are doing as well. It does show, I think we'd probably have a depression by this weekend somewhere in the Bahamas or Turks and Caicos. It shows the center's trying to spin up here. Meanwhile, notice it still does not have Humberto in the picture just yet. And so the further and further away those stay from each other, the more likely this thing could get pulled up into the United States. And so I think that's one of the concerns here with what I'm seeing with some data this morning, is that there very well could be enough separation between these entities that if this actually does get enough movement and a steady rate to the north, then there's a real chance that thing is strengthening. It's moving over warm waters, which exist right here off the east coast of Florida. And yes, that thing could move inland there. That right there is well, the models are latching on to it being at least Humberto being a decent hurricane this weekend, but you're still talking about a big distance between the two at that point. They're not very large systems. In fact, Humberto is tiny in this model run. This system looks a little bit wider in nature, and so these two are going to be traveling. Do they interact? We want them to interact because that actually could keep this system from making landfall, but if they don't and it outruns it, I think we've got a landfalling tropical storm or maybe even hurricane in a scenario or two moving inland into the East Coast. That would probably happen Monday and into Tuesday. Again, it's not a whole lot of time to watch. And so if I'm over on the East Coast, really staying up to date, maybe tracking the tropics twice a day to see what's happening. So Humberto and then Imelda, that's why we think that'll be our next storm out here. And then after that, you've got Jerry, Karen, and Lorenzo. I'm sure we'll be checking some of these names off as we head into the month of October. That's what we're tracking here on your Thursday morning on Tropical Weather Impact. We'll see you right back here Friday with the latest update. Thanks for joining me.